Pat Daly, how are you?
I'm doing well, and you?
I'm doing good, thanks. Thank you for coming
So,
on to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
my pleasure. So good to be here and happy to meet you.
Yeah, same. So correct me if I am wrong. You are coming to us from Houston.
Yes, Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. Yeah. I've never been to Houston, but I've spoken to so many people from Houston, and it's such a cool place. And everybody is just so cool.
It is. It's a cool place. A little hot in the summer, a little humid, but hey, you're probably used to that as well.
Yeah. And have you stayed in Houston your whole life?
No. I grew up in the northwest part of the U.S. in a town called Seattle, where Microsoft started. Uh, but moved to Houston after I got out of the Air Force, and I married a woman from Texas, and so one of the things I say is that if you marry a Texas woman, you're going to end up in Texas, and that's true.
Nice. And how long have you been married?
This is hard to believe, but it's been 42 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
You don't even look the part.
Well,
Very
thank you so much for that.
Yeah, 42 years. Wow. That is a milestone, you know.
It is. It is.
Like if you look at relationships globally in this day and age in 2025, for a relationship or marriage to last longer than a year is becoming so difficult.
It is. It is. Our whole perspective of marriage is changing, and I don't necessarily think that's good, but I think that's true.
Yeah. So what's the magic tip if you could name one?
Okay. The Everyone in the marriage has to do more than 100% of the work. So going into the marriage, you got to realize that as the husband, you're going to do 120% of the work. And the wife going into the marriage, she's got to realize she's going to do 120% of the work. So if you come in with that mindset, then the little things don't seem so bad.
And the work never stops, right?
The work never stops. It doesn't matter what you do, there's still dishes to be washed and trash to be taken out, and the work on the relationship too. I mean, that's a big deal. You have to, even when you get irritated, you got to stop yourself and go, okay, what is she really saying? What is her intent? What is my intent? So
Listening, such a skill.
listening. Amen, brother. Yeah.
Such a skill. I can't remember how the quote goes, but it's something like treat each day like it was the first day. And that part,
Yeah.
the relationship alive. Still buy her flowers. Still take her out.
Yeah. That's a great that's a great quote. I like that because one of the things that has occurred to me is that over the years, I've found that often I am treating strangers better than I'm treating my own family, my wife, my daughters. Uh, and that's wrong. They're your family. You should be treating them at least as good as you treat anybody else.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But thanks for that. Welcome
Yeah.
to the Kino podcast where we keep it spontaneous all the time. Uh, but Pep, thank you. And I love it when a guest comes on with so much energy, smiling, just lays down the foundation for the whole show. you know. But Pep, thank you once again for coming on. You are the first author on the show for 2026. So yeah,
Yeah.
we're starting off on a good note this year, ladies and gentlemen. So Pep, before we get to your books, your series, your artistic career, let's go back to day one, okay? NASA engineer, pilot, entrepreneur, gamer, author, like you are carrying some cool labels around, right? How many people out there in the world would love to be Pat right now, carrying all these cool labels? So let's go back. let's get to know you better. Where it all started
Sure.
for you. Thoughts for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I grew up in Seattle. I went to the U.S. Air Force Academy, graduated from there and went straight into the Air Force to uh, become a pilot. While I was training to become a pilot, I was in Lubbock, Texas, and I was at a party. And even though I actually had a date with me at this party, I met this amazing, hot woman and started shamelessly flirting with her. And so, that cratered one relationship, but it started another one that has lasted 42 plus years. Um, yeah, so then I flew in the Air Force for a bunch of years, was a fighter pilot and a test pilot. And then I left that. I went to work for Honeywell at Johnson Space Center, working on the shuttle and the space station and a thing called the X-38, um, which was supposed to be the lifeboat for the space station. And along the way, I've been a reader forever. Always loved to read. When I was a kid, I was raised on Heinlein and Asimov, and as I've gotten older, it's people like Aaron Morgenstern and Neil Stevenson that have kept my interest. And so I always wanted to write. And I had a few attempts earlier, and maybe not so great. And then once I left the Air Force, and then I left Honeywell at NASA, I started my own company with a couple other folks, and I wrote my first nonfiction book with them, and that just wasn't scratching the itch. I mean, I've always had this wild imagination, and I wanted to put some of that to work in writing a science fiction book. And so uh, I was working up in Washington State on a program called the Space Jet, which, even though it says space, it's an airplane. It was a Mitsubishi produced passenger liner, but then COVID hit, right? And that changed the whole world. So suddenly I was spending a lot of time at home instead of at work, and there wasn't much work to do. So I started writing my first book, and it kind of took off from there. So that's what got me here.
Wow. So, what inspired you to join the Air Force? Was it something you were passionate about?
Oh, absolutely. I remember when I was 10 years old, um, when we landed on the moon, and we were on some family vacation, and we were driving this old station wagon through the hot southwest part of the United States, and my dad pulled over, and we were in some store parking lot, and he cranked the radio up, and we listened to the first moon landing. And at that point I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be an astronaut. And so I started chasing that, and it turned out that all of the astronauts were test pilots. And I thought, well, okay, if you want to be a test pilot, the best place to go is the Air Force and work your way up through, regular pilot to test pilot to astronaut. And I got all the way except that last little step. I interviewed to be an astronaut, but they had better, cooler people to hire, and so I didn't make that. But yeah, always my dream.
Yeah, sure. So, I never knew there were so many people who inspired to be astronauts and it was so hectic to actually get in. You would think that's like something in demand.
Yeah, yeah. Trying to remember. I think the time I actually got to the interview process, there were close to 10,000 applicants for about 10 slots. And of those 10,000, they only interviewed 100. And so I was pretty happy to be one of those 100. And then out of that 100, they picked 10. So it's like, all right.
Yeah. Plus, it's, a different area. If you look at the space industry now, right? This also becomes so private with SpaceX,
Yeah.
right? So as that because I'm sure you're still keeping tabs on what's going on in the industry, has that created more opportunities for inspiring astronauts or people who want to work in the field, or is it still the same? Or is NASA still relevant?
Ooh, that's the best question right there. Is NASA still relevant? So let me start there, and then maybe we'll work our way back
Well,
to SpaceX and companies like Blue Origin. So if you think about the airline industry, once upon a time, only really the military, the government was flying airplanes. And then a few people said, well, I got this airplane, I learned how to fly in World War One. Maybe I can do something with this airplane. And so they started flying the mail around. And then it became larger airplanes, particularly after World War II, when we had bigger airplanes, the bombers that could be converted to passenger flight. And my thought is that if we had kept that a government program and it had been run by some bureaucracy like NASA, tickets would cost $10,000 to go anywhere, maybe $25,000 to go internationally, and the service would suck. So I don't think that it's in the best interest of the world at large for governments to be the ones running space programs. That's why I'm so excited for things like SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic that now, you're kind of taking it away from the government and privatizing it. And I think that opens up a ton more jobs for people that are interested in getting to space, and a ton more opportunity for, space tourism, space exploration, stuff like that. I think it's time for us to move away from NASA because it has
moving to
lost.
Mars.
Moving to Mars. Yep. Yep.
I feel the same way. I had this conversation with someone in December, and I referenced the airline in South Africa, okay, South African Airways. It used to be such a great airline, completely 100% managed by the government. But because it was managed by the government, there was just this decline over the last 10 years. Thousands of people lost their jobs, and the government failed to take accountability. The private sector was demanding, hand it over to us. We will take over the airline and we will make it successful again. Until now, they're refusing to do so. Now, not many people are using the airline anymore because there's so many options now on the table, depending where you want to travel to these days. Like, for example, if you want to go to Australia, okay, I'm going to book on Air Australia or Etihad or Qatar.
Yeah.
It works out better for me. It's cheaper. So it's sad. It's sad. And it's not only one entity. In South Africa, I feel it has just been on a decline. Anything that the government has ran, it started off well, sustained itself, and then over the last 10 or 15 years, this decline, from airlines to energy to water and sanitation, it's bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you there because there's some things that I think that the government should be involved in, things that are inherently governmental, like building big highways. Yeah, that the government ought to fund it. They ought not to do it, but they ought to fund it. And things like national defense. Yeah, that's a government kind of thing. But things like carrying the mails or shipping packages from place to place or hauling people like us from where we are to where we want to go, that's not necessarily the government's deal, and they ought to stay out of it.
Yeah. I mean, in this day and age, there needs to be a balance.
Yeah.
There needs to be a balance if we are going to evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. One of the questions I was going to ask you is why did you not write, nonfiction? So that first novel that you spoke about. What was that about?
The first book I wrote was nonfiction, and it was all about aviation. It was crew
Yeah.
resource management, organizational resource management, and I look back at it now and I go, oh God, it was so bad. I mean, it was technically accurate, but it wasn't all that engaging. It wasn't a fun read.
Hmm.
Um, and so then I pivoted to fiction, and then last year I actually published another nonfiction book, and I think it's a much easier read. And part of that is I've just gotten better as a writer. I've grown. It's like going to the gym. Uh, the more you go, the better you get, the better shape you're in. So it's the more you write, the better you get, and especially if you get feedback. It's you go to the gym and people are saying, when you're doing squats, you ought not to do it this way. Maybe keep your legs, your knees over your feet, stuff like that, and so you can get a lot more help. And when you get help, when you get that feedback, I think you get better.
Yeah, no, 100%. It goes for anything that we do in our life these days, right? You have to keep working on your craft. If I go back to the first podcast I ever did in 2021 and I compare it to 2025, there's a difference. I'm also in the music industry. If I compare my DJing in high school versus now, huge difference. If I, take my music production when I first started out versus now, huge difference. You have to keep working on your craft and it never stops, right? Learning never stops. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
So are you an independent author?
I am now. I did not start out that way. I started out during COVID. I spent about 6 months chasing the major publishing houses. And then I found a smaller press, a smaller publisher, and I got on board with them. And that was great because I got my first book launched. They did a lot to support me there. And then, unfortunately, when the time came for my second book, the manuscript was ready, and they were just so swamped with work, including the owner's first novel, that they said, well, it's going to be 2 years before we can get it on the streets. And I said, I can't do that. I can't wait that long. I'm not that young a guy. And I think, it's gotten to the point where, and I don't know if this is the same in the music business, whether you really need a label anymore, or if it's just as easy and maybe more profitable to put your stuff out on your own. Because I imagine you can hit Spotify and all that kind of stuff without a big label.
Yeah, no, there's pros and cons. And honestly speaking, when Mickey reached out to me like a long time ago and asked me whether I would want to interview and chat with authors, I said yes, because I noticed it was all under the same umbrella of creativity. And then I also picked up that the music industry is not that different to the book industry. It's only the end product that's actually different. So being an independent, profitable, not as easily, just as being an independent author takes a lot of time and energy. It's there's less red tape. It's more decentralized. To get your music onto Spotify, Apple, YouTube is much more easier. You have full control at that. You have full control over your creativity, your art cover. As I said, there's no red tape at all. But you also have to keep in mind when you upload to Spotify per stream, you're getting paid like $0.000156 per stream. I think it's like for $1,000. Sure, I think it was like 1 million streams, or it was $4,000. Yeah, 1 million streams is $4,000. And you really have to be passionate about what you're doing, or you're not going to survive. Like, I consult with independent artists because over the last 5 years, I've built like a solid network for myself. I've educated myself. I know how the industry, operates A to Z. And if you're not passionate, you are not going to last. And if you don't pivot, you are not going to last. So by pivot, I mean you can't just be like a recording artist, do a track, get into studio. That's all fun for the artist. It takes a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort. You get the track out there and you're expecting to earn, revenue the next day. It's not going to happen. Even if you leverage, the help from mainstream artists, which I have done as well, it still takes a lot of work. So you need to now say, okay, what do I love doing in the music industry that I can specialize in besides being now a recording artist or a music producer? For me, it was consulting, it was podcasting, it was being a blogger. There was all components of my career. So I earn an income if I consult with a creative,
Mhm.
but the music is still going on. But can I live off the music? No, I can't.
Yeah.
And there's not many artists that can say, look, we can. So we have to find, other avenues of income, whatever it may be. Maybe you want to write a book. Okay, go out and write a book, merchandising deals, endorsement deals, sync opportunities. So there's not a big difference, between being an independent music artist or being an independent book author. You face the same challenges. Both markets are crowded. And to get yourself out there and known takes the same amount of effort using the same marketing tools, exactly the same marketing tools. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So I've listened to some of your stuff, Rise Up and Alluvia.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I listened to both those this morning, and I loved Rise Up, by the way. Um, so one of the things that's critical for me in writing is having an editor, having somebody that's like an unbiased third party look at my stuff and be willing to give me the honest feedback that's, Pat, that sucks. Sorry, but you got to pull this out or you got to do this, change this, and remember your audience. Is that the same in music?
Yeah.
Is there somebody that
I
plays
mean,
that role?
yeah, definitely. I mean, you need that solid team, you know. So now for you, for example, you got your editor, you got your publisher, you got your publicist. So the same goes as being an independent artist. You need that solid team. You need someone to keep doing those double checks. Now, to the tracks that you did listen to, thanks for listening to it. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So those tracks now feature US artists, which is Lil Wayne and Rick Ross. So my whole mandate with this now was to create opportunities for the lower class independent artists, no matter where you're from. So by leveraging now Rick Ross's name, it can now build your brand. So that,
Yeah.
was the mandate. So I invested in that opportunity. But then now leads back, to the consulting. But the moment the beat is actually done, which is the starting point, and then it comes, then my team is finished with the beat, and then like it's now here, and now I need to go out now once Rick Ross is recorded. Now he's 16 bar first or Little Wayne, and now I go source an independent artist, that has no idea how the industry works, still chasing this fancy 360 record label deal, which does not exist anymore. Hasn't existed for quite some time. The mainstream record labels are focused on their 1%, their Taylor Swift, for example. And they also now, are focused now on artificial intelligence and how AI music is actually developing and how different other components are developing instead of looking for that next big star. But even if you do find the next big star, they probably want to be independent anyway because I'm going to own all of my rights. So obviously, it's a better option for me, even though the label comes with much more opportunities that can benefit me. Artists are now asking the question, okay, even though you're going to offer me A, B, and C, which is going to be beneficial to me, but I'm also selling my soul away now. Because I mean, we've seen it happen all the way throughout history. The moment it's pen to paper, you don't own anything. The label owns it all, even though they're paying you that advance. And I understand why some independent artists would want that advance of $10,000, $20,000. But they don't understand how the business works. The moment you accept that $10,000 and you sign that contract with the mainstream record label, you have to keep in mind when royalties come in, they are deducting that $10,000 or $20,000 from the royalties first before they're paying you out. And how much are they paying you out? Maybe between 10 and 15% of what's left over. So you're still covering all the costs. If you're going on tour, depending what deal you sign, or you're not looking at the contract because you're so excited to get this record label deal, all the costs that's affiliated with the touring as well, or with the merchandise, they're deducting from you, first before you actually get paid anything. And the saddest part of it all is you own nothing,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's tough. I'm not going to lie to
Yeah.
you. It is tough. And that's why I say you really have to be passionate
That's
and you really have to look for different options. But you do need that solid team, 100%. Just like how you need an editor. Yeah, we have now arrangers/editors also when it comes to the production. So same teams, different product.
okay. All right. So,
Yeah.
so I'm curious about this. How about lyrics? Because I'm a word guy, so and you're a word guy because you're putting words to music. Is there anybody that looks at the lyrics and says, maybe change this phrase or this intro or something, or change this word? Is there an equivalent in music?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And we do it as a team. We do it as a
Okay.
team. We go through the lyrics. We're like, okay, you know what, this is going to work. That's going to work. But because I love creative independence, so if I'm sitting down now with a vocalist that I want to be on this track, I would say, you go do the lyrics, come back. We're going to sit with the guys and we'll take it from there. So that gives them now, it's autonomy, you know. So this is what you want to push out to the world. I just give them, the overall purpose of the song. What
Okay.
message are we trying to get out there? It's like writing a book, the underlining message. What do we want the reader or the listener to take away that can impact their life afterwards, after listening to the track or the album, EP or LP? So that's what, we do. So I tell them, okay, come back and, show me what you got. Then they come back, and because I want to keep it fully independent and I don't want to operate like how the record labels do, I'm like, okay, let's just adjust this because that will actually flow better. This will actually make the melody make sense to me. As long as it makes sense to me, I'm like, yeah, let's put it out to the market and let's see what people say, and we learn from those experiences. So as long as it makes sense to me at the end, because I have the final say, so as long as it makes sense to me, the harmony makes sense to me, melody makes sense to me, because there's melody in the beat and then there's melody in the lyrics as well. So as long as it makes sense to me, I'm like, okay, cool. Let's put it out to market. This is your message to the world, and let's hear what people say. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the way you put it about what is the reader or the listener going to take away? I mean, what is somebody that listens to one of the songs, what's going to be reverberating in their brain when they're walking to work or walking to school? What are the phrases in my books, or what are the scenes that they're going to be thinking about, and they want to go, oh, how are the characters going to get themselves out of that? So yeah, I think there's a whole lot of similarity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's talk about your similarities. Let's talk about now the Spark Chronicles series.
Okay.
Right? How did this start for you now?
Okay.
Let the first question be like, you sort of said it before, you had this love for science fiction.
Yeah.
So what was like the final nail in the coffin? Okay, I want to do science fiction, and this will be the first book.
Well, I had a few aborted attempts. I started in my 20s writing a book, and it was kind of fan fiction. It was set in the Star Trek universe, and I still think it was a fun story, but it was horribly written, and so I kind of put that aside and got busy with life. Uh, and so then when it came time to pick up the pen again, or turn to the keyboard again, what prompted me really was, I have two daughters, and at the time they were playing a game called Pokemon Go. And because as a parent, I always want to know what the heck my kids are doing, because yeah. So I start playing, and I'm out walking my dog the first day I'm playing. I'm holding my phone, walking the dog, and there on a real background pops up this little Pokemon called a Pidgey. And so I have to then, toss a Pokemon ball or a Pokeball and catch the Pidgey. And that's, I mean, the gameplay is inane, but the concept of a virtual creature superimposed over a real background just lit my brain on fire. Because I thought, I mean, I've played virtual reality games, and your entire house is at risk when you're playing a VR game. Because I mean, you got the goggles on, you're playing with your handsets, and you could step on your cat, you could knock your TV off the stand, you could punch your daughter, and that's all. I mean, the visuals are cool, but it pulls you away from what is real to the point that it can sometimes be dangerous. And so I thought, what if, like Disneyland, instead of just a bunch of little rides, people had some sort of like goggles that would enable them to see virtual creations superimposed over a real background. And I thought, well, that would be kind of cool. I'd pay to go to that park. Um, and then also, I was always that kind of guy that when I was a kid, I thought, what would it be like to spend the night at school, or to spend the night in the baseball stadium, or I wanted to know what was going on behind the scenes. And so I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about, okay, what would happen if you could peel back the layers of the onion and see how it really works? And maybe it's not all what you think. Maybe it's not all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. What if there is a dark, gritty, underlying part of this that maybe nobody else knows about, but there could be really bad things or nefarious things going on? And so I thought, that's my book. I'm going to write that book. And so that's what got me started on Spark, my first book in the series.
So but briefly, what is Spark about?
Okay. Spark is actually an acronym for a place called Solar Prime Augmented Reality Park. Now, if you just take the first words or the first letters, that's Spark. And that didn't make a whole lot of sense. So I just blended it a little bit and made it Spark. And it is it is set in Southern California, near where I used to fly as a test pilot. And it's basically a Disney-sized augmented reality park. Now, the two primary characters, the first one is a young Korean American boy named Will Kwan, and he's 16 when we meet him. And he has been orphaned through a series of tragic events. It's set a little bit in the future, so I've hypothesized a future Korean conflict, and his father dies in that, and then his mother has kind of a mental breakdown, and so he has to deal with that. She becomes a hoarder, not throwing away the trash, and rats infest their house. So, I mean, as a kid, he starts getting a little bit warped, right? And one of the things that freaks him out is that now there are rats living in his house, and he can hear them in the wall at night, and he is now paranoid. He imagines some sort of creature living in the wall, and he calls it the thing in the wall. And so, for his own self-protection, he starts sleeping with knives. He takes some knives out of the kitchen and he starts, holding them while he's sleeping. And his thought is that this is what's going to enable him to protect himself and his mom. Well, then his mom has a pulmonary embolism. She dies, and so he's now an orphan, and he ends up in what in the U.S. is called the foster care system. It's a combination of a government-run group homes as well as government-funded private homes where they take a kid with no living relatives and they go, all right, let's stick you in a family that's willing to have you. And so he goes through a series of these, and he's not really successful because who wants this creepy kid who sleeps with a knife all the time? And so what starts the whole adventure off is he's in a new home. He's still having dreams about the rats and everything, and so he steals the knife out of their kitchen, and now he's sleeping with it. And middle of the night, he wakes up and he's got to go pee because who doesn't, right? And so he gets up and he's wearing his boxer shorts and a t-shirt and he's walking to the bathroom, but he's still holding this big ass knife. And his new foster mom comes out of her bedroom to see what's going on. And she sees him, she sees the knife, and she is convinced that he is going to murder them all in their sleep. And so she starts screaming and he runs. And so he runs, and now he's in his boxer shorts and his t-shirt with a knife. Well, he gets rid of this knife, and then he becomes a runaway, and he runs away to the last place he remembered being happy when both his parents were alive, which was Solar Prime Augmented Reality Park, Spark. And his goal is to get a job there, work there, and then, find his path through life from there. Well, he's only 16, so they won't hire him. And he quickly runs out of any money because he spent money on buying new clothes because he only had his boxer shorts and t-shirt. And so he thinks, well, if I could figure out a way to stay in the park at night, I wouldn't have to pay for my entrance fee every day and I could still play. And so he figures out a way, and along the way he meets a young lady who goes by the name of Feral Daughter. Now that's a side story that we can talk about later maybe. But at first they just butt heads. They fight about everything, but she eventually shows him how to do exactly what he wants to do, and that's how to get through the hidden staff-only doors and down into the mechanical rooms, and how to spend the night in the park and not have to pay for entry. And they eat free at the employee cafeteria, a bunch of little stuff. And so they start out butting heads, they end up holding hands, and about that time, there are a bunch of people who are trying to figure out how Spark does what they do. And they're looking to steal the tech infrastructure, the AI core that runs the whole thing. And so when they do, they end up running into Will and Farrell. And, their first thought is, well, we'll just kill these kids. It's, we're killing a bunch of other people. 2 more kids is nothing. But Will and Farrell fight back, and then the whole thing explodes. So it goes from there.
Okay. Wow. You weren't wrong when you were saying you had quite the imagination. And now, virtual reality and augmented reality, by your definition.
Okay. All right. Virtual reality is when the user is completely pulled into a totally artificial environment. They can't see where the actual walls are. They can't see where the actual floor is. They're surrounded by everything, by things that are purely created by the software. And so it makes for some pretty cool games. And the problem is that you have now severed the connection to reality. So you don't really know where you are in a room. You don't really know where anything else is except what's in your virtual world. And augmented reality is a technology that blends the real with the virtual so that, let's say you're walking down the street, in virtual reality, you wouldn't even see the street. In augmented reality, you would see the street and see everything, plus the character from whatever story or quest you're involved in that is going to walk up to you and say, "Hey, can you help me find my dog?" Or, I, no, I lost my treasure. Can you help me go find my treasure? So um, it's a little bit like Westworld. I don't know if you've ever seen that series.
No, no, no.
Oh, okay. Great series.
I get what you say. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So just like now, Will, am I correct?
uh,
Will is the main
yeah.
character in
Will.
the book.
Yeah,
Okay. So Will now has some sort of trauma. Okay.
yeah,
So he runs away. He's got the knife. He runs away to Spark. Now that's his
yeah,
escape.
yeah.
So in the real world that you live in, that you and I live in, how safe is virtual reality for us? Is it an escape or is it actually helping us with our lives?
That is a great question. I think virtual reality has huge potential for helping us. I think for the most part, right now, well, we use it in a couple of ways, right? We use it for simulation to train people to do things. So you get into big simulators like airlines do or like ship operators do, and it simulates the whole environment so that you can make horrible mistakes and nobody dies. And that's a great training tool. Um, but I think there is also a real potential downside to virtual reality because if you sever our connection with actual reality, then all the women are beautiful. All the women want you. You can have all the women. You can drink all you want, take all the drugs you want, and you feel great without any of the consequences. And so once you're in that, and I think we see this already sometimes that people that have such a huge online life that they start losing track of what's really going on, that it impacts them mentally and they start losing contact with the real world and having completely false expectations for in the dating world, the women they meet, in the work world for what they're going to get paid for what they do and how quickly they'll get promoted, stuff like that. So I think there's two ends of it. I think it can be wonderful and I think it can be horrible. I think we have to navigate that carefully.
Yeah. So how would we go like about it? Because this fits into your series, this world,
Yeah.
you know. So would what you have just explained as being the concern, would that be now a takeaway, an underlining message from your work?
Yes, I think so because one of the things we see now is AI influencing the internet.
Yeah.
And I read an article that between 20 and 80% of the comments that you read on somebody's post or somebody's blog are bot generated. And they are created purely for the purpose of getting a reaction. because now you start following that and reacting to that. Now they get more likes, they get more hits, and they can monetize what they're doing. Um, and and also we've seen the whole Terminator series where Skynet, kills everybody or tries to kill everybody. And so we have these visions of AI, and they're not false. They're not false, but we're only looking at one side of the spectrum. So there have been a bunch of people that have written that AI needs to be strongly regulated, that governments need to take control. And I think that's a problem because it's no longer that expensive to get into AI. And if it's like suddenly you decide to regulate bicycles and only certain people can produce bicycles and the government is going to take control of bicycles. Well, how hard is it to make a bicycle? Anybody with a that wants to can probably figure out how to make a bicycle on their own, and somebody with a little more cash can do that. And that's where we are, because AI is not like nuclear weapons. The barriers to entry are not that high, unfortunately. And so my personal opinion is that we need to fight AI with AI, because computers are so fast and we struggle to keep up with technology anyway, that I think if we use technology to control technology, we're going to be better off.
Yeah, yeah. No, makes sense. Does make sense. There's just like, so many question marks. Hence why I just get, everyone's opinion on it, because AI, virtual reality, it's going to play a critical role, in the future to come, and already plays a critical role with our days to days. We see so many, you know, companies letting go of people because they just leveraging technology, and the technology now that's doing the work. Look at how AI, can assist people like us, with day-to-day operations, whatever it may be. So, yeah. So, as an author, living in this world where somebody can now write an ebook in 5 minutes using an, AI tool, how do you feel about that?
I'm terrified. Because I've gone to a couple of book shows, and I walk around, I see what other authors are putting out, and sometimes they have great covers. And I went to one who was writing military sci-fi, and she was in the military at the time. She was still in the Air Force, and she was writing this. And I started looking, and she's got 10 books that she's published, all within the past year. And ain't no human being doing that. So, I started talking to her, yeah, well, I use ChatGPT, and it's like, okay. So it's almost like, why do you even put your name on the cover? And the state of the art now is, and there's more than one author at any book fair that is doing that is using AI to write books for them. And here's the problem, is that AI does not yet, I think, fully understand what hooks people. And so they can write a grammatically correct, sound plot with few highs and lows, and it just still is dull because it doesn't yet get what churns inside our hearts and guts. It doesn't really get to that. And one of these, the lady I was telling you about, I bought her first book, I read it, and I got 60 pages in, and her back cover promises that stuff is going to happen, and 60 pages in, none of that has happened yet. And so it's just a dull story about a woman who has some issues with her dad. I go, well,
Yeah.
that's everybody. So there's nothing unique yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. I mean, even though, you're one of many creators globally that is terrified and concerned,
Yeah.
the future of the industry. But I still feel, and I'm like, 100% certain about this, that people are still always going to look for the human touch,
Yeah.
whether it be in reading the book or listening to music. I feel authors like this lady could have gone about this in a better direction if she wanted to share a story from the military. She could have gone, different, and plus also shared like a lot more transparency. Like in music, I've done my own AI project, but I told people this is an AI project, I'm
Yeah.
trying something that's different and unique. I'm creating something that's fiction, storyline, but in music form, and I'm open about it. So she could have gone, that route and say, look, I want to share my story, but I am using AI to actually do it. She could have put her on the front cover, could have been on the back. It just
Yeah.
brings so much more credibility and trust to you as an author. Because if I pick up the book and I'm like, okay, cool, here's somebody who wants to share their story from being in the military or where they served and so on, and then it says on the book, AI generated or however you want to phrase it, I will have so much respect for you. I would. Because there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with using AI. You're using it for whatever the reason may be. There's nothing wrong, but at least you're telling me, you want to share your story and use AI to do it because, look, I come from the military and I've never written anything before, but this is the way for me to share my story with low expenses. I'm going to be like, yeah, I'm going to support you. Come onto the show. Let's chat about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But if you hiding it now and making it seem now to the market that you wrote it yourself, yeah, then there's a problem.
Yeah.
There's an ethical
Yeah.
problem here. This is where ethics
Yeah.
now come to play.
Yep. Absolutely.
So,
And
yeah,
I don't think we can turn away from technology because I mean, virtually everybody in the world uses Microsoft Word. And Microsoft Word tells you when you misspell something. Puts a little jagged red line underneath it. Well, guess what? That's AI helping you out. And so I don't think we ought to shut down our computers and go to pencil and paper again. Oh, pencil. Now you're using technology because you've got an eraser at the end to help you, fix a problem. I think we have to embrace the technology, but like you said, we've got to be honest about what role that technology played in what we're doing. Because, yeah, then I'll respect you. Because if you put the heart into the story and they put and the AI helps you smooth it out and make the punctuation and the grammar all correct, then hey, I'm okay with that.
yeah, no, 100%. And every author has a different goal. So, I mean, if your goal is to just get people to read about your story, there's no harm in being transparent. You'll
Yeah.
probably get more monetized by being transparent, because people want to support what your story is about.
Yeah.
But if you're not, you lose it all. Just like that, credibility is gone. There's no trust anymore. And you got a good story to share about whatever that experience may be. So, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing and giving your insights, on it. I'm just in my mind now trying to link it up to like Spark now, because that's now, there's so much of this. Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't read the book yet, but of what we're talking about that's in there, or leads up to there, or is around some breadcrumbs of it,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with the series, you got 4 books so far.
Yep. Four
Great.
books in the series. Yeah, and it's Spark, and then the next one is Fire, and then the next one is Orkland, and the last one is Embers. And Orkland only came to exist because my editor said that Embers was getting too big. It was, who are you, J.K. Rowling or what? You got to pare this book down to a more manageable size. So, you're going to, we'll pull out this little part that can be a standalone. And so I did. And so you have a novella that's about, I don't know, 90 pages compared to the others, which are all 300 plus. And so it follows the two main characters from, before they meet until a more mature ending, or not a mature understanding of their relationship. So the first 3.5 books span about a year, and then the last half of book 4 jumps us, 10ish years into the future.
And is Will in a better state?
Well, he's gone through some trauma, but he no longer has to sleep with a knife. So he's taken his licks. He's been beaten up a little bit, but he is in a much better state overall than the day we meet him, for sure.
And that right there is like another takeaway, for the readers. You going through this experience with Will. Let's just say if your target audience now is people who are going through some type of trauma, I feel that could be your type of audience, mixed with science fiction lovers.
Yeah.
You read this, by the time you finish book 4, Will has, overcome his trauma, and then so have I. And that's the
Yep.
Yeah. That is the beauty of it. Yeah. No, I was actually talking to a colleague of mine. He's based in Canada over the weekend. We touched base, we had a chat. And, he wants me to assist him, with his book. And, when it comes to the branding and marketing and getting more, viewership today, I mean, he's at a age and stage in his life now where, Kino, I don't want to do all that. I'm telling you now, I am not doing all of that. I want you to do all of that for me.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, cool. And then, we touched on this, like what's the underlining, message. So we know exactly where to target. Like, okay, you can be science fiction or horror, thriller, love story. Cool, that's your fan base. But in this day and age now, we need to target that underlining whatever that someone may be going through or is passionate about. So by reading your book now, Spark, and following this journey of Will, I could have trauma and I start this journey with Will, who's carrying a knife at the side of the book and is covered and, happy at book 4. Yeah, I honestly feel empowered after that. And this is a reality, This is a reality, what I'm saying for the listeners. This is the experience that you get out of reading a book like Spark, and following the series. Or like, what do you do when you're feeling depressed and you choosing not to read, and then you listen to this song? After that song is feeling you're finished, you're like, yeah, okay, I'm ready to take on life now.
Yeah. It's like what you did with Rise Up, right? I mean, its underlying message is about you get knocked down, but you overcome the trauma in life. You rise, not necessarily to the occasion, because we still get beaten down sometimes, but you get back up and you survive and thrive going forward. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's exactly, what the record was about. It was for independent creators that, hey, you can do it, rise up, tackle it, go for it. And that's exactly what it doesn't matter where you come from, what's your social class, how much money you got in the bank account, what's your educational status. All of it is irrelevant. If you really want to do this in life, you need to get out there and you need to do it. Over the holidays, I heard someone say, and Pep, when I hear people give such negative comments, I just try to avoid them completely. I don't even attempt to share my opinion with them because they will never get it. But the worst thing I could hear someone saying, that people need to be realistic, especially if they're young and they're passionate about something. Now, I'm young, I'm in my 20s, I'm passionate about writing. And now the adults that I am surrounded by are telling me, no, you need to be realistic. There's no scope for it. This is just a passion. There's no room for passion in this world. And you need to go get a job, you know? Okay, fair enough. I understand there's expenses. I understand. But doesn't mean that you need to give up completely on your passion. You are not going to be here forever. You know,
Yep.
we all have to leave this world. We are all going to die, and we have no control on that. You know, only God does. So while you are here, do your best to live your best life, you know, living your passion. Do what makes you happy, fulfilled. You can go out there and you can have a great job, and we have all been there, and you can earn a lot of money. But when you wake up in the morning and you're not feeling fulfilled and you're going to bed tired and you know there's no life in you left, no whatsoever, and you wake up in the morning and just repeat, you know, the simulation, you know, it's like a virtual reality
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
You know, it's so sad, you know. And it is one thing I want to do, you know, on the podcast, you know, which is my message is that look, if you are a young creative out there, an inspiring writer, you need to go for it, you know.
You do. You do. And kind of along with that, that you talked about a little bit is you have to do it yourself. You can't wait for someone else to pick you up. You've got to be the one that stands up and pursues that passion. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, that's what we need to keep doing and bringing phenomenal authors like yourself on the show. Not only to talk about their life, their work, but you know, your words is to inspire a creative listener, you know, who will listen to the show, who will tune in, because now that gives them a motivation. Okay, let me keep going. 1 second at a time, not even 1 day at a time, 1 second at a time. You know,
Yeah.
that's the message.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you should know no matter how far you come, how many books in, you know, we still face challenges as creators. And challenges will always come, but we need to understand that these challenges are happening for us, not to us. And what can we learn from these challenges and then move forward?
Yeah. I love that. I love that thinking about the challenges as happening for us rather
Yeah.
than to us, because that changes the whole mindset, right? This is now an opportunity for me to go do something to get better, to improve my craft, as opposed to, oh well, I'm just a victim here, you know, I'm getting beaten down. I love that, man. I'm gonna steal that quote if it's okay.
Yeah, and there's many people, motivational speakers that go around, you know, quoting us like it, it comes from them, you know, that's the perception. It comes from them,
Yeah.
you know. But I actually learned this by studying a bit of history, World War II, Winston Churchill. This was like
Uh-huh.
the origin for it, you know, where it all started because, you know, what his wife told him after the war had ended was look for the blessings in disguises. And because he looked for those blessings in disguises, he ended up writing his memoirs. And those memoirs actually like prevented a whole lot of world wars after that. So after I did that course on Winston Churchill, I was like, yeah, you know, now I'm gonna look for the blessings in disguises. Life is happening for me. So if I'm going through this now, what is the universe and God teaching me here? You know, because it's something to be learned. So
I love that. I
yeah.
love that.
So Peck, what's next for you to conclude? What's coming?
I've 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 started my next book, and it's aimed at a little older audience. The characters are a little older. I hope to have it out, and it's January. I hope to have it out this year. Um, and it's my tagline for it right now is Stranger Things meets Cocoon. And you may not have ever seen the movie Cocoon, but it's surrounded it's it's a bunch of older folks that encounter an alien presence, and you know how they benefit from it, and the loss they feel along the way. And then of course Stranger Things is, you know, we all know about that. But so that yeah. So that's where I'm going now. And then I'm also simultaneously working on my my next nonfiction.
Nice, nice. I won't ask you anything about that. You can surprise us.
All right. Thank you.
Pep, thank you so much for such an awesome, humble conversation. And where can listeners find you online?
Okay. I'm online at my website is thepatdaily.com, and that's also where I blog. And then on Facebook, I'm Pat Daily Author, and Instagram, I'm Pat Daily Pics. So all of those work to get me. And I'm also on X, but I'm rarely on X, and I don't even remember what my handle on X is. So you'll have to forgive me for that. Yeah.
One the same, we just created the account. It's there. We tweeted a few times. It's still called Twitter. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah, I also. I think when it, I'm not a political guy. So I think when it started to get too political for me, I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
Plus there's a whole lot of fraudsters on there as well, Yeah, you can win this and this tweet. And then they got like thousands of followers. So they're influencing some product or some new crypto token, And I'm thinking, this is not for me. I really just want to be in this crowd right now.
Yeah.
So that was it. That was it. But yeah, Pat, thank you so much. And I wish you all the best, with your career and all the best for, future success with Spark.
Well, thanks very much, Kino. I really appreciate it. And I've loved being on your show. It was a lot of fun talking to you. And I wish you all the success as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I really say, goodbye, as in this is officially goodbye, because you just never know where we'll see each other again in the future to come.
Yep. Until we meet again.
Yeah, until we meet again. Thanks, Pat. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, you too. Take care.
Bye.